I'm telling you, she's no attorney. Look at her. She doesn't belong here," one of the officers sneered, his voice echoing across the polished marble foyer of the Grand Federal Courthouse. Several heads turned as he made no effort to keep his accusation quiet. He jabbed a pointed finger in the young black woman's direction, making sure the bustling crowd noticed. The woman, poised by a set of ornate double doors, caught the attention with an unblinking gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply exhaled, spine straight, chin high. A hush spread. Even those hurrying to nearby hearing rooms slowed to watch. Tension crackled like static. Whispers filtered across the space. Who was she? Why was she so calm under such blatant disrespect? No one knew yet that the real shock was moments away, a revelation that would change this entire courthouse forever. Drop a comment if you believe no one should be judged for simply existing where they belong. Tell us where you're watching from. The courthouse was a place for decorum, where suits and badges walked with rehearsed confidence. But as soon as this young black woman had stepped inside, dressed in a crisp blazer, quietly reading through documents on her phone, the subtle and overt biases had begun to swirl. She'd arrived early, hoping to observe a public session about community policing reforms. Yet from the moment she passed the security checkpoint, it felt as though she were navigating a gauntlet of suspicious stares. One officer, a tall man with narrow eyes and a clenched jaw, had hovered too close while scanning her ID. Another, the same who had just announced she didn't belong, had muttered something to a colleague. She'd caught the tail end of it. "Sure she's not a defendant?" Followed by a curt laugh. Her posture remained steady, but inside, she felt the sting of every side glance and overheard murmur. It was happening again. The assumption that she couldn't possibly be here in any capacity but the wrong one. She was used to these quiet humiliations, the small signs telling her that her confidence was seen as an intrusion in spaces that weren't made for her. Just a few feet away, the court clerk's desk buzzed with activity. Yet the staff never looked in her direction except to eye her suspiciously. One older clerk nudged a younger one, whispering, then forced a thin smile when the woman caught her gaze. Undeterred, she kept her shoulders back, stepping forward toward a posted docket list. She had every right to be here. She breathed in, reminding herself that dignity was her armor. But despite her outward calm, she could feel a storm brewing around her, one she never asked for, but was all too ready to weather. Striving for peace, she approached a nearby officer who wore a senior badge and a forced grin. "Excuse me," she began, voice measured and polite. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. hearing on community policing. I just wanted to confirm—" The officer's smirk cut her sentence short. "You? Attending that hearing? Ma'am, are you sure you're not lost? This is serious business. We don't usually entertain spectators who aren't directly involved." She blinked. It was a subtle put-down, a coded way of saying, "You're no one important." Without missing a beat, she slipped her phone into her pocket. "I'm here as a concerned citizen. I have a reason to be in that courtroom." He shrugged, clearly unmoved. "All right, lady, if you say so." His tone dripped with condescension. "But if you cause any disruption, we'll have to remove you." A chorus of low chuckles sounded from the officers gathered behind him. A few bystanders looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. A mother with 2 children hurried them along, ignoring the scene. An older man in a suit glanced over, then swiftly averted his gaze. The manager of the courthouse security team, a stern woman with a starched uniform, pretended not to notice, focusing on a stack of papers. She stood taller, heart pounding, but expression placid. "I won't cause trouble," she stated, voice unwavering. "I'm simply here to learn." Still, they dismissed her with a wave of a hand, as if she were a nuisance in need of swatting away. The tension in the air thickened, voices whispered behind her back, and a few phones lifted discreetly to record. This was a public place after All. But the hush of watchers did little to help. It only magnified the isolation of facing blatant bias, alone. The hush around her began to gather weight. One of the officers, a younger recruit emboldened by the senior's scorn, raised his voice so everyone could hear. "If you're just going to loiter, you'd better move along. Unless you want to be on the defendant's bench." An uncomfortable laugh echoed through the hall. A ripple of second-hand embarrassment flitted among onlookers. Now, even a few attorneys in their tailored suits paused mid-stride, scanning the scene. The hostility shone in the officer's eyes, fueled by the assumption that a woman like her had no legitimate business here. Steeling herself, she took a measured breath. "I said I'm here for the hearing," she repeated quietly. "That's all." Her response only seemed to spark further disdain. One of the officers barked louder. "She's probably here trying to find a case to mooch off of. Or maybe she's running from one." More snickers ensued. The huddle of uniforms cast a ring around her, not physically restraining her, but ensuring she felt cornered by their presence. The air felt colder. A knot twisted in her stomach as she glanced around, noticing how many turned their faces away, unwilling to get involved. The security guard near the metal detectors seemed uncertain, shifting from foot to foot. No one was stepping forward, not a single voice of support or protest. Yet she refused to bow her head. Though her jaw clenched, she kept her expression unreadable. She knew how to handle this brand of intimidation. Still, the onslaught of bias threatened to erode her composure. Somewhere in that tense standoff, she felt her phone vibrate again. She paused, inhaled, and thought, soon they'll see they messed with the wrong one. And she clung to that truth like a lifeline. Her phone pulsed in her hand with an urgent text message. She glanced down and read a name that made her lips curl into a soft, knowing smile. Silencing the device, she raised her gaze, eyes brimming with quiet conviction. "My father's about to arrive," she said calmly. The officers seemed unconcerned, rolling their eyes in near unison. One of them muttered, "Yeah, sure, Daddy's coming to rescue you." A flurry of activity at the courthouse entrance stole their attention. The revolving doors swung open to reveal a tall, distinguished man in a tailored suit, flanked by two aides. His presence was magnetic, commanding the hush of those nearby. When he made direct eye contact with the group of mocking officers, they stiffened without fully understanding why. He strode toward the woman, every step quiet but resolute. Nearing her side, he placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Then, turning to the officer in charge, he spoke with an edge of authority that no one could ignore. "Is there a problem here?" His voice resonated, deep and composed, with the distinct timbre of someone used to being heard. The officer's cocky grin wavered. We were just..." Before he could bluster out a half-baked excuse, one of the courthouse staffers rushed forward, almost tripping over her own feet. "Director Monroe," she gasped, eyes wide. "We didn't know." "You were coming, sir. Apologies for any confusion." A murmur spread like wildfire among the onlookers. Director Monroe? And the woman next to him. That meant she was... Within seconds, the entire mood shifted. Where moments ago contempt had reigned, fear and regret now flickered in those same officers' eyes. They were beginning to realize the full weight of the mistake they had made, and it was going to cost them their smug pride. All eyes swung back to the young woman. She stood with dignity, head high, her expression betraying only the faintest trace of relief. In a matter of seconds, her perceived powerlessness melted away, replaced by an almost regal confidence. A harried courthouse administrator came skidding around the corner. He saw Director Monroe, inhaled sharply, and rushed to greet him. "Sir, we weren't informed you'd be attending the hearing personally." Director Monroe lifted a hand. "I'm here as a father today. This is my daughter, Amina Monroe." The sound of her name carried through the atrium, amplified by the tense silence. Gasps rippled among the staff and spectators. The looks of confusion turned to realization. Amina was not just some random visitor. She was the incoming head of National Civil Security, recently appointed by the executive branch, a rising star known for her incisive mind and unwavering commitment to equity. Though young, she had already made waves at high-level policy discussions, tackling systemic injustices in policing. In that moment, each officer's face drained of color. The same group who had mocked her now recognized she was the newly confirmed Director Monroe's heir apparent, an influential figure set to oversee law enforcement reforms at the national level. Every rushed whisper carried words like brilliant, game changer, and destined for leadership. Amina's gaze lingered on the officers who had jeered her. She didn't taunt them or lash out. Instead, she was the picture of composed self-assurance, the very same poise she'd held from the start, but which they'd mistaken for pretense. Her father's presence underscored the truth. She belonged here more than any of them realized. And their bigotry had revealed their own shortfalls, not hers. Director Monroe turned to the officer in charge, the one whose arrogant laughter had first burst across the room. Rather than anger or grandstanding, the director's voice held a tempered calm. "Lieutenant, we need to talk about how guests are treated in this courthouse, especially those coming to observe matters of public interest." The lieutenant swallowed hard, sweat beading on his brow. "Sir, we didn't realize who she was." Amina stepped forward. "That's the problem," she said softly but firmly. "We all deserve respect, whether we're recognized or not." Her eyes flicked to the other officers, one of whom now stared at the floor. The senior officer who initially waved her off tried to offer a half-hearted apology. "Ms. Monroe, we meant no harm. We just—" Director Monroe cut in, voice still, measured. "If you can't handle a citizen's presence without intimidation, I have grave concerns about your conduct when no one's watching." Even the passers-by who had witnessed the spectacle began to chime in with nods and muffled applause. Their quiet agreement swelled until it filled the marble foyer, a wordless statement of solidarity for Amina. Then, with a polite but unyielding tone, the director addressed the group as a whole. "I believe these gentlemen have some duties to tend to elsewhere, unless they'd prefer we have a more formal discussion about harassment right here, right now." No one dared protest. The officers, once so brazen, found themselves hastily retreating, shoulders hunched in subdued compliance. A wave of relief mingled with triumph coursed through the crowd. Justice, delivered in the form of truth and dignity rather than rage. A few staff members even started clapping, emboldened by the Monroe's unshakable poise. In the wake of that applause, the officer's final steps out of sight felt like a victory for everyone watching. An uneasy hush settled across the hall as the officers dispersed, each of them bearing the weight of silent judgment from every corner of the cavernous space. Phones were still raised, capturing footage that would undoubtedly spill onto social media within minutes. Amina's calm voice would be heard. The officer's mocking would be replayed, and the contrast would speak volumes. The impact was immediate. Court clerks exchanged looks of relief, as though a long-standing tension had finally been addressed. Judges emerging from closed chambers paused to observe the aftermath, and more than a few offered Amina a respectful nod. That silent wave of acknowledgement was worth more than any forced apology. Meanwhile, the security manager rushed forward, promising a thorough review of her team's training. "We'll do better," she said, shoulders trembling with the urgency of genuine remorse. "This courthouse stands for justice, and we can't tolerate bias that undermines it." Yet the greatest shift was not in policy or procedure, but in perspective. The onlookers who had witnessed the incident now carried a new awareness. That respect should never hinge on one's appearance, nor should power alone command courtesy. Amina had embodied a truth that demanded recognition, that dignity is everyone's right, not a privilege reserved for the few. In the stunned silence, she turned to her father. A small, grateful smile tugged at her lips. He's taught me well, she thought. But she also realized something else. She was the next generation, entrusted to ensure that the promises of justice and equality did not remain mere words etched above a courthouse door, but were lived and enforced. No one said it out loud, but everyone could feel it. A ripple of change had been set in motion, one that would linger far beyond this moment. Word of the confrontation spread online in record time, capturing the public's imagination. Clips of the officer's initial taunts and Amina's steady composure played side by side with Director Monroe's calm but cutting rebuke. Almost overnight, hashtags calling for equal treatment in courthouses and beyond trended across social platforms. Within days, the Grand Federal Courthouse issued a statement revising its protocols, mandating a series of mandatory bias trainings for all staff and security teams. Their message was clear. The courtroom must serve justice, not prejudice. Amina, for her part, continued on her path toward officially taking the helm at National Civil Security. But her resolve had deepened. This was just one incident among countless she'd encountered, and sadly far more than she ever should have. Still, she walked forward with her head held high, not merely because of her father's influence, but because she knew her worth and her mission. She had always belonged. By the time she stepped onto the courthouse steps, the day's hearing already underway behind her, a small group of people gathered in solidarity. They applauded gently as she passed, offering supportive smiles and nods. It wasn't about the fancy suit or the high-profile role. It was about who she'd always been, a voice for change, forged from quiet integrity. Glancing back at the building, she felt a surge of resolve. This was only the beginning, a single chord in a much larger symphony of reform. She wouldn't rest until the dignity she claimed today was accessible to all. Have you ever been judged for simply walking into a room? Would you speak up if you saw this happen? Do you believe confidence should be welcomed, not policed? Drop your thoughts below. We're listening.